any rate, that is my fate. But I am come tonight, Ebenezer, to warn you that you can avoid it. I bring you a hope and chance of my procuring.
Thank you, Jacob. You always were a very good friend to me.
You will be haunted by 3 ghosts.
What? Is this the hope and chance you offer me?
Without their help, you cannot avoid my fate. Expect the first tonight, when the clock tolls.
Couldn't I have them all 3 at once and have it over and done with?
Expect the second on the second night at the same hour. Expect the third on the third, when the midnight bell has ceased to vibrate. For your own sake, Ebenezer, think on what has passed between us, and look to see me no more. And the spirit vanished. Scrooge ran to the door, but it was still double bolted.
Bah! Hum!
Deeply troubled, Scrooge ran into his bedchamber, hurled himself upon his 4-poster fully clothed, drew the curtains around him, and fell back on the pillows into a deeply troubled, restless, uneasy sleep. Stayed the second, the first of the 3 ghosts. The nearby church clock tower rang out its single, solitary, melancholy boom. The curtains of Scrooge's bed were drawn back, and drawn back by a singular figure. An old man, yet not so much an old man as a child. Long white hair cascaded onto his shoulders, and yet there was not a wrinkle upon the face. He carried in his hand a branch of holly, and in singular contrast to this wintry emblem, his long white gown was trimmed with the freshest summer flowers. Scrooge sat up uneasily in bed.
Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold me? Who and what are you? I am the ghost of Christmas past. Long past? No, your past. Raise up, Scrooge, and walk with me.
When Scrooge did so, he found himself walking through the streets of London. By looking in the shop windows, he could tell that here, too, it was Christmastide, and yet the people were all dressed in the fashions and styles of his childhood. The ghost conducted him to a counting house in the heart of the city, and turning to Scrooge, asked,
Do you know this place, Scrooge? Know it? Why, yes, I was bound apprentice here as a boy.
As they entered, they came in sight of a fat, jolly gentleman in a Welsh wig, seated at a high desk. The sight of him, Scrooge broke into an exclamation of delight.
Hey, it's old Mr. Fezziwig, my dear old master. It's old Fezziwig alive again.
7 o'clock sounded. Mr. Fezziwig bounded down from his high desk, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, cried out in a loud, jolly voice,
Christmas Eve, boyos! Come in, Dick. Come in, Ebenezer.
2 young men, one of them the spitting image of Scrooge's younger self, ran into the room.
Christmas Eve, my buckos. No more work tonight. Let's clear the room for the dancing. Bustle, bustle, bustle.
In a trice, the young men had transformed from a counting house into the snuggest, warmest, delightfulest ballroom you could hope to find of a winter's evening. Then in came the musician with his fiddle, music book under his arm, and went to Mr. Fezziwig's high desk and made a perfect orchestra out of it, tuning up. like 50 stomachaches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, beaming, substantial smile. In came the two Miss Fezziwigs, dimpled and delightful, followed by the 6 young men whose hearts they were breaking at that particular moment. In came all the young people employed in the business. And there were dances, and there were games, and there were forfeits, and there was mince pie and 12th cake and negus and punch. But the great effect of the evening was when the fiddler struck up the old Sir Roger de Coverley, which Mr. Fezziwig himself stood up to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. A positive light seemed to shine out of Fezziwig's calves. They were like 2 moons. You couldn't tell where they were going to appear in the ballroom next. And when they'd gone through all the figures of the dance, corkscrew, bob, and back to your partner, Mr. Fezziwig cut, and he cut so deftly that his calves appeared to wink. At length, the party drew to its conclusion. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig stood at the door, receiving the grateful thanks of their contented guests. At this, the ghost turned to Scrooge and said, "A poor thing this party, Scrooge. Could only have cost a few pounds of your mortal money. Does old Fezziwig deserve all this gratitude from these silly people?" "No, Spirit, no. It's not the money. You see, old Fezziwig had it in his power to make our lives miserable or happy. He chose to make them happy. It was done by way of a look, a word, a kindly gesture, things so small, and yet they're worth all the money in the... For the money in the world. Yes. Nothing. I think there is. Well, it's just that I wish I had my clerk, Bob Cratchit, here. I'd just like to say something to him. At this, the ghost smiled, and passed its mystic branch over Scrooge's head. In that instant, Scrooge found himself back once more in his bedroom, lying on his 4-poster. Only this time, he fell back onto the pillows into a much more easy, restful, comforting sleep. Stay the third, the second of the 3 ghosts. Once again, the nearby church bell tower rang out its single, solitary, melancholy one. Scrooge sat up in bed. His bedchamber had undergone a transformation. It had become a grove of perfect greenery, hollies and ivy, whose red and white berries were gleaming in the reflected glare of a great fire that was roaring up the chimney place. And in the centre of the room, there was a throne. But this was no ordinary throne. It consisted of hams and geese and turkeys, barrels of beer, tons of wine, strings of sausages, Christmas puddings and 12th cakes, piles of fruits and nuts and great steaming bowls of punch which filled the room with their delicious aroma. And seated on the throne was a giant, glorious to behold, in a long green gown trimmed with red fur. He had a holly wreath around his head, bore in his hand a cornucopia. "Advance, men, and know me better. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. You have not seen my like before, I think." "No, sir, no, and yet
Last night I was led abroad by one of your kindred spirits who taught me a lesson which begins to work upon me. If you have more to teach, pray do so that I may profit by it.
Then touch my robe. When Scrooge did so, he found himself once more walking through the streets of London. Again, by looking in the shop windows, he could tell it was Christmastide. Now, the people were dressed in the fashions and styles of his own time. The ghost conducted him to Camden Town, a poor, working-class district of the capital, and the house of Bob Cratchit, his clerk. As they entered, Mrs. Cratchit, Bob's wife, with Belinda Cratchit, the second of her daughters, was laying a white tablecloth upon the board, whilst Master Peter Cratchit, eldest son of the house, was prodding at the potatoes which were simmering on the hearth, as two small Cratchits, twins, boy and girl, came running in from outside to say,
Outside the baker's shop, they can smell the goose cooking and know it for their own goose. Goosey, goosey, goody, goody, goosey. Now, calm down, my dears, calm down. You're making me giddy, jigging around like that. Where's your precious father got to, and Tiny Tim? And where's our Martha? She weren't as late as this last Christmas Day. Here I am, Mother, cries a young woman, entering in shawl and bonnet. I'm sorry I'm late, but we had a great deal of tidying up to do after the rich folks' Christmas Eve dinner last night. Well, never you mind, my dear. You take off your shawl and your bonnet and come and sit you down here by the fire. No, Mother, no! Father's coming! Go and hide behind the closet door and surprise him!
So Martha went and hid behind the closet door, as little Bob entered, wearing his white comforter scarf, and bearing on his shoulder his youngest child, Tiny Tim. Ah, alas for Tiny Tim. He carried a wooden crutch, and his little limbs were supported by iron frames.
Where's our Martha, then? Asked Bob. Not coming, said Mrs. Cratchit, winking broadly at the others. What? Martha? Not coming on Christmas Day?
There was such a declension of Bob's high spirits that Martha couldn't bear it, even if it was a joke. So she came prematurely from her hiding place into her father's arms, whilst the twins bore Tiny Tim off to the washhouse that he might listen to the pudding singing in the kettle.
Robert, how did our Tiny Tim behave in church? As good as gold, my dear, and better. You know, he says the strangest things. He said that you were glad that you were a cripple sitting there in church, because it would make people think of him who made the blind to see and the lame to walk.
Little Tim's active crutch was heard upon the floor. So Bob compounded a drink of gin and water and lemons and put it on the hearth to simmer, whilst Master Peter and the elder children went off to the baker's shop to fetch the goose. When they returned in grand procession, such a bustle ensued. Master Peter mashed up the potatoes with incredible vigour. Miss Belinda sweetened up the apple sauce. The twins laid places for everybody around the board, not forgetting themselves, and mounting guard at their positions put spoons into their mouths lest they should shriek for goose before it was their turn to be served. At length, the bird was placed upon the board, and Bob said grace.
But what we are about to receive, my dears, may the good Lord make us truly thankful. Amen. 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 Amen.
Round table. Eked out with the mashed potato and the apple sauce, it was sufficient for the entire